our managerial economics tutorial section. I'm in the person of Denutsui Kekeli. Yeah. So basically this Denutsui tutorial where complex topics are being broken down into simpler concepts for easy understanding. So I'm continuing with the managerial economics tutorial questions for the regular students. I'm continuing with tutorial question 4. So we're given this is the question. The demand and supply functions for a firm's product are specified as QD is equal to 6,000 plus 1.6Y minus 1000 P and QS is equal to minus 3,000 plus 2000 P. Where QD is the quantity demanded for the product, QS is the quantity supplied, and P is the price of the product. Y is the average income of consumers, which is currently 3,750 cedis. I. Calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. If there is a per unit tax of 2 cedis imposed on the product, what will be the new equilibrium price and quantity? I. Determine the tax revenue to be generated by the government. Vin. Find the percentage of the tax to be borne by consumers. Vin. Determine the social surplus after the tax. I. Being the manager of the firm that sells the above product, would you prefer the government to impose the per unit tax of 2 cedis or a price control that leads to the same price as the after tax found in II above? Explain. So being the manager of the firm that sells the above product, would you prefer the government to impose a per unit tax of 2 cedis or a price control that leads to the same price as the after tax found in II above? Explain. So the question, we're given demand. So we're given a demand function QD to be 6,000 plus 1.6y minus 1000 p. This was our demand function. Then with the supply function, QS was given us minus 3,000 plus 2000 p. Now in the question, they gave us income. What we know to so income, which is a variable y, to be 3,750. So I calculate the equilibrium price and quantity. So I is equilibrium price and quantity. Now the condition for equilibrium price and quantity states that QD must be equal to what? QS. This is a condition. But before we start, the supply function gives a complete function because it shows what? A positive relationship between price and what? Quantity of a product. But with demand function, we don't have a simplified demand function. So we have to find the actual demand function. So actual demand function before we will be able to find for equilibrium price and quantity actual demand. So we're given the initial one, QD is equal to 6,000 plus 1.6y minus 1000 p, where the y, which is income, was given in the question as 3,750. So QD is equal to, this is 6,000 plus 1.6. Y see y, I'll fix 3750 minus 1000 p. Please, I'm coming. sorry about that. So 6,000 plus 1.6 times 3750. So 1.6 times 3750 would give us 6,000. So QD is equal to 6,000 plus 6,000 minus 1000p. So we have QD to be, this will give us 12,000 minus, I hope it's 12,000. 12,000 minus 1000p. So this becomes our new demand function. So now we can start. QD is equal to QS, where QD is 12,000 minus 1000p is equal to QS. QS was given in the question as minus 3,000 plus 2,000p. We group like terms. So I have 12,000 here. You move this to the left hand side, becoming positive 3,000. This is 2,000p. You move this one plus 1,000p. So this gives us 3,000p, which is equal to 15,000. So if I'm finding for p, I will divide both sides by the coefficient of p, which is 3,000. So p, which is the price. So the equilibrium price therefore is 5 cedis, 5 Ghana cedis. That's the equilibrium price. So we now move to the equilibrium quantity. So the equilibrium quantity, you can use any of the functions. So I'm picking the supply function. This is minus 3,000 plus 2,000p, where p was 5. So QS, this is minus 3,000 plus 2,000. P is 5. QS becomes minus 3,000 plus 2,000 times 5 gives you 7,000. Let me try it. Minus 3,000 plus 2,000 times 5. Yeah, 7,000. So we have quantity to be 7,000 here. That's I. So I. If there's a per unit tax of 2 cedis imposed on a product, what will be the new equilibrium price and quantity? So tax imposed. So there was tax imposed. The amount was 2 cedis. We impose tax and grant subsidy. Tax we subtract. Subsidy we add. In case you are not giving tax in the question, you will be giving VAT, value added tax. In case you are not giving subsidy, you will be giving tax cuts, or what we call the tax relief, or what we call the tax holiday. They are all for what? Subsidy we add. But tax, it's either is tax or VAT. VAT, we subtract. So both tax and subsidy affect the supply function, but the way they affect the supply function differs. Tax we will subtract, subsidy we add. So I'll pick my supply function. It was minus 3000 plus 2000p. Now, both the tax and subsidy affect the supply function, but they affect the price side of the supply function. So open brackets P, tax I know I subtract, subsidy I add, and this is tax. So minus 2. The 2 is the tax. This one, this 2 here is the tax. So now QoS is equal, this is minus 3000 plus 2000 times P is 2000 P. 2000 times 2 is minus 4000. So QoS is equal to, so minus 30 minus 4000 is minus 7000. So it's 2000 P minus 7000. So this becomes our new supply function as a result of tax. As a result of tax. Okay. So since we have this, we can now find for the new equilibrium price and quantity. So new equilibrium price and quantity. So the new supply function should be equal to the old demand function. So the new supply function was 2000 P minus 7000, and the old demand, let's check, the demand function we had was 12,000 minus 1000p, 12,000 minus 1000p, 12,000 minus 1000p. So we group like term, this is 2000p. We move the 1000p to the left, it becomes positive 1000p. This is 12,000. You move 7 times, becomes plus 7,000. So now 2000 plus 1000 gives us our 3000p. So 12,000 plus 7,000 gives us 19,000. So since I'm finding for P, I will divide both sides by the coefficient of P, which is 3,000. So let me add an N to make its new price. So the new price is 6.33. This is our new equilibrium price. So let's find the new equilibrium quantity. You can use either the demand or the supply function. So new equilibrium quantity. So I'm using the demand function. So QD, it was 12,000 minus 1000p, where the P we just solved was 6.33. So QD is equal to, this is 12,000 minus 1000 times 6.33. So QD is equal to 12,000 minus 1000 times 6.33, which will give us 5,670. Now you notice that when you do for demand and that of supply, there will be a bit difference. It's because the numbers are in decimal. Is it okay? So this is quantity for demand. So now the third one, determine the tax revenue to be generated. Tax revenue. Tax tax revenue generated as tax times new equilibrium quantity. So the tax in the question, they gave us two cedis. New equilibrium quantity, the new quantity you had as a result of tax. This is it. So it was 5670. So 2 times 5670 is 11,340. So this is our tax revenue. So you move on to the Ivan. Percentage of tax. Percentage of tax borne by consumer. Percentage of tax borne by consumers. So we're still talking about the agents. So this question is the same as agents share of tax, where we have the consumers share of tax and the producer share of tax. So with the consumers share of tax, it's your new equilibrium price minus your old equilibrium price. Now your new equilibrium price in the question was the new price as a result of tax, which was 6.33, minus the old equilibrium price, the one we solved in the question. It was, I think it was 5. Yeah, we had price to be 5. So in doing this, the consumer share of tax becomes 1.33. So this is consumer's share of tax. But the question stated that was percentage of the tax borne by the consumer. In order to find the percentage tax, it's the consumer's share of tax. So percentage tax is consumer's share divided by tax times 100%. So consumer's share was 1.33 divided by tax was 2 times the 100%. So let's see the answer. 1.33 divided by 2 times 100. 66.5%. 66.5%. Now, with this question, they told us to find consumer share of tax. We were not asked to find producer share of tax. But let me add it. In case you are asked producer share of tax. So producer share of tax is the tax in the question, or the tax that was given in the question, minus consumers share of tax. They didn't ask you to solve this particular one, but I'm adding it. So the tax in the question, they gave us 2 cedis minus consumer share of tax. We had 1.33. So producer share of tax times 2 minus 1.33. That gives you 0.67. So that is producer share of tax, assuming you were asked to solve it. So in finding the percentage of tax for producer, so percentage tax for the producer to becomes producer's share divided by tax times 100%. So the producer's share was 0.67. Tax was 2 times 100%. So 0.67 divided by 2 times 100 will give you 33.5%. So this, assuming we are asked to find producer, this would have been producer's percentage. Now there's a trick here. You know, total percentage is what? 100%. When we add it, we are supposed to get 100%. So producer was 33.5 and consumer was 66.5. When we add that, we should get 100. 66.5 plus 33.5, we get 100. So that's how to prove it. So it gives you a total understanding here, total percentage. So the next one is VIN. The VIN is, this is what most of you guys have issues with. So this is social surplus social surplus after tax. Let me show you the clear distinction. So let me just give you a note here before I even solve the actual thing. We have before, we have after. Now, if it's before, you are asked to find social surplus before tax. We also have social surplus after tax. So social surplus before tax, we would remember that both before and after deal with consumer and producer surplus. Just get it in mind. I'm just giving an overview of this whole, because I know most of you guys struggle with this thing. So social surplus after tax, we have before and we have after. Now, what the before, you use old demand curve, old supply curve. Old demand curve, old supply curve. Then that's, so with the old demand curve, old supply curve, that is where if you want to find QoS, you make Px is equal to 0. If you want to find Px, you make Qx is equal to what? 0. And at the end of this, in finding the social surplus before tax, it becomes your consumer surplus plus your producer surplus plus your tax revenue. I think I've simplified it. So with before, old demand curve, old supply curve. If you want to find QX, you make PX 0. If you want to find PX, you make QX 0. The answers you get now. At the end of it, in finding remember that with this consumer surplus and producer surplus, they both use the same formula, which is half times base times height. So this is before concept. So let me do the after concept. So with the after to old demand curve, new supply curve. Why is this one new supply curve? It's new supply curve because the tax has already been calculated after tax. This is before tax. This is after tax. So I use the new supply function I had after tax. Then if you want to find QS, you make PX equal to 0. If you want to find PX2, you make QX is equal to 0. Now after this, the social surplus after tax becomes the consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus tax revenue. So I've just given an overview here. That's it. So this is a clear distinction, how to deal with this thing. I think it's good. Now, so let's move back to our question. Our question is what? After tax. Our question is what? After tax. So we are going to use this particular concept. We are going to use, because our question is after tax. After tax, I need what? Old demand curve, new supply curve. Ours is after tax. Remember, what we are solving is after tax. So the old demand curve. So demand. So what was our old demand? So demand was, let's check it. 12,000 minus 1,000 P. 12,000. 12,000 minus 1,000 P. As I stated, if you want Q, you make P 0. So when P is equal to 0, Q is equal to 12,000 minus 1,000 times 0. So Q is equal to, that will give us 12,000. Now, when Q is also equal to 0, so 0 is equal to 12,000 minus 1,000 P. You move this to the left, it becomes positive 1,000. 1,000 P is equal to 12,000. Since we are finding for P, we will divide both sides by the coefficient of P, which is 1,000. So I have this. This is 1,000 P over 1,000. This is 12,000. This 2 over 1,000. So I have this. So P is equal to, so 12,000 divided by 1,000. That will give us 12. So P is 12. So I've done for the demand side. I've done for demand side. Now I'm about to do for what? Supply. I told you that this is after, so I will use the what? New supply function, not the old. Check the criteria I gave to you here. We use what? New. If it's before, I'll use what? Old supply. This is after, so I'll use what? New. So let's go and pick the new supply function. Our new supply function. Yeah, this is our new supply function. This is it. 2000p minus 7000. 2000p minus 7000. 2000p 2000p minus 7000. So when p is equal to 0, q is equal to 2000 times 0 minus 7000. So q is equal to minus 7000. Now when q is also equal to 0, so this is 0, this is 2000p minus 7000. You move the 7000 to the left hand side, becoming positive 7000. This is 2000p. Since I'm finding for p, I'll divide both sides by the coefficient of p, which is 2000. Now p is equal to 7000 divided by 2000. That would give us 3.5. This is 3.5. So now I can find for what? The consumer surplus and what? Producer what? Surplus. So let me just use a diagram, or let me, okay, I think I should do it this way then. So I have this. This is demand. This is quantity output. This is price. This is demand. This is supply. Now we have this. This equilibrium quantity, the initial equilibrium quantity, the one we saw, the equilibrium quantity was 7000, and the price was Sorry, I want to do something. So the equilibrium quantity was 7,000 and the initial equilibrium price was also 5 cedis. The new equilibrium price was the new price we had. The new equilibrium price was 6.33. 6.33. So you match it. And the new equilibrium quantity was 5,670. So 5,670. Now where they are meeting, you are supposed to have another curve there. Now this is our new supply curve, so I can do it S1. How did we get this particular curve? It was as a result of tax. So since we have this now, let's introduce so per what we solved from the top. We had the down price to be what? 3.50. So let me see. Okay. So there is the 6.33. What we solved using the demand. So this is demand side. So with the demand side, we had P to be what? 12. So this is P. This is 12. So this was our initial equilibrium. And this is our new equilibrium. Now let's go to the other price we solved. 3.50. This is it. That's 3.50. Okay. So now, in finding the consumer surplus, you know consumer surplus is half times base times height. So the consumer surplus here becomes half. Remember that it's what? After tax. So half times base. So the base, I'm going to use this one, the 5670. So why am I using the 5670 but not the 7,000? The question is dealing with what? After what? Tax. Assuming it was before tax, I would have picked the 7,000. But since it's after tax, that's why I'm using the 5,600 and what? 70. So half times 5670 times the height. So this is my consumer surplus, this side. So from this side upwards, so 6.33 minus 12 would give me the h here, the height here. So that is 12 minus 6.33. So consumer surplus is equal to half times half times 5670 times 12 minus 6.33. You are going to get 16074.45. So this is our consumer surplus. So now let's find the producer surplus too. So we producer surplus to the same formula, half times base times height. Now we know the actual tax initial equilibrium price was 5. Chart price gave us what? 6.33. So this is the consumer, the tax consumers are going to pay. So if I want to deal with producer, just the 6.33 minus 2 would let me know the ones producers are paying. 6.33 minus 2 would give us 4.33. So you see from this side you choose it like this. So this is 4.3 what? 3. So we have the side to be the consumer surplus. That's the side. So basically, if I'm supposed to pick the producer surplus, I'll pick it from this end, this whole end, this side, producer what? Surplus. So I have producer surplus half times base times height. So let me use this then. So producer surplus half times base. So the base is still this one, the 5670. Remember it's after tax, so this will be our base throughout. This one. So 5670 times the height. So we have, remember, we have 6.33. We have 6.33 here. The actual thing, this one, 6.33. And remember, when we saw for the producer's share of tax for the price, sorry, the producers, when we're finding the producer surplus, when we're getting the coordinates, we had the side to be 3.5, this side, 3.5. So if we have this one to be 6.33, this one is what? 3.50. Remember, with the 4.3, we wanted to know the actual amount producer was paying since we knew consumer to be paying 6.33. So in getting the height, we will subtract 3.50 from what? 6, because this point here is where we are dealing with what? Our tax, after tax, this point. So this is consumer. This place picks the whole what? Producer, this place. So if I want to find the height in this middle, this side, we already know this to be equilibrium price. If we want to find the height, 3.50 minus 6.33. So 6.33 minus 3.50. So producer surplus is equal to half times 5670 times 6.33 minus 3.50. We're going to get 8023.05. So that is our producer surplus. I hope you guys get it. So when you go to, you get to know why we're picking those coordinates. I've explained it. So now we need to find the social surplus after tax. So social surplus after tax is the consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus the tax revenue. So consumer the consumer surplus we had from the side, there's the consumer surplus. We had 16074.45 plus producer surplus 8023.05 plus the tax revenue. The tax revenue, solve it at the top. Where did we solve this tax revenue? Oh, I remember we solved the tax revenue. Yeah, there's the tax revenue. 11,340. 11,340. 11,340. So we add everything up. So 16074.45 plus 8023.05 plus 11340. That would give us 35,437.50. So this becomes our social surplus after tax. So with the next part of the question, the VI. Being the manager of the firm that sells the above products, would you prefer the government to impose the tax? Would you would you prefer the government to impose the per unit tax of 2 cedis or a price control that leads to the same price as the after tax price found in II? So that the tax price was 6.33. So we are saying that, would you recommend the government to maintain the same price as the after tax found, or the government should impose per unit tax? If you are maintaining the same price, that is, if we are adopting price ceiling, which is a pricing strategy, it means that we are going to run in what? A shortage. So, because the effect of a price ceiling is going to result in a shortage. So if you are going to adopt a price control measure, I think it wouldn't be helpful for the firm. But if there's an imposition of tax by the government, definitely after the government has deducted their tax, the producer would be able to get its profit as well. So you could see it from the diagram. So this is 6.33. This is after tax. This is the ceiling price. The price ceiling here is 5 cedis. That's the equilibrium price. So if you are adopting a price control, it means you are going to literally resolve in what? result in a shortage. So since we have this price after price here to be 6.33, we would recommend the government to rather impose tax so that the government will be able to get revenue, then the producer will also be able to make profit. Because here lies the case, the consumer is making 6.33, it's making 6.33, it's allowed to pay 6.33, and the producer is rather paying what, 4.33. So the consumer even pays more than the consumer. But once there is tax imposed, producers will be able to benefit more than that of the consumer. So I prefer them to implement what, the tax, or impose the tax of 2 cedis. So let me see if I can write a policy recommendation here for you guys. So tax may be preferable because tax may be preferable because it yields revenue. It yields revenue and shares burden between consumers and producers, while price control transfers most of the expenses of public revenue and what efficiency loss. So this is just to give you an overview of what I was explaining earlier on. So tax may be preferable because it uses revenue and shares burden between consumers and producers, whilst price control transfers most of the expenses of public revenue and with efficiency loss. So basically with the question 4, this is how we are supposed to solve it.